reduce emissions by 150 megatons. Big ambitious goal. The two biggest ways that they're doing that is through the climate smart agriculture and a national biodigester network. And this group really right here has provided the initial resources and leadership to get that off the ground. So let's open up the floor. Anyone have a question that they would like to ask anyone on this panel? Yeah, in the back.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We're gonna bring a mic over to you actually. Thank you.
We got it. Thank you. Hi, I'm here from the Canadian Press. Appreciate you taking my question. This is really for anyone who wants to jump in, but I'm just curious if there are any specific measures that you're planning on tracking with this alliance with regards to the eventual aim of net zero by 2050. I'm kind of curious what measurements you're looking at or how you're going to track essentially the success of the work that you're doing.
And guys, you can just give me a hands up if you want to jump in on that so I can kind of direct it.
Well, first of all, I would say that the measurement is pretty clear because the emissions coming from the agri-food chain are actively measured today. We know that currently, and it was originally assembled in the fact base from BCG, that today's emissions are 136 megatons, I believe, and projected to be some 190 megatons by 2050, and the 150 would be some 75% of that. That's the end-to-end emissions. So it's tracked today, but I think the fair statement to say would be that it's tracked in piecemeal, and the tracking is fragmented, and probably not as real time as we would like it to be, but it is tracked. It is tracked today and will continue to be tracked, and I'm sure that will be one of the objectives of CANZA over the course of the next few years, is to make the tracking that already exists more real time and more accurate holistically. In the topic that I addressed with the panel, with these expert panel, I think that's 25 of the 150. I think Regen Ag is somewhere in that zone. What is it? Mr. Fact Man over here is gonna correct us. So what is it?
It's slightly more within that zone, 30 to 35 megatons.
And you were the one who BCG did most of the original analytics. Did I speak the truth in some of that?
You did, and the 190-ish, that's actually 196. So you were right on.
Is there a follow-up? Is there a follow-up?
Maybe I'll just jump in on that side. So a couple of things. One, we want to build a successful, approved MRV system, measure, report, verify, which ultimately will issue an inset and then offset carbon credit. So the measurement there is, do we have a system? How much carbon are we storing per acre, per hectare, per year? Have we rolled that system out to X% of farms in Canada, and therefore have a system that's measuring the active carbon storage in our system? We don't have that today. We're measuring a lot of other things that help create, whether it's water in the soil, whether it's the amount of nutrients that we're using, nitrogen we're using. We're measuring a lot of things, but we're not actually measuring consistently across the system the amount of carbon storage, nor are we rewarding farmers for that carbon storage. So a big deliverable that we have through this is to actually create that system, which doesn't exist now, and then scale it across the country as an economic incentive to farmers, and therefore we'll be able to measure through that the amount of carbon storage, carbon offsets that we have in the country as well. So a big gap that CANZA is looking to fill.
Thank you. Yeah, I see a hand over here.
Denise from Farms.com. Just wondering what agriculture groups you're working with or planning to work with, because obviously if you're not going to work directly with farmers, it's not going to ever succeed, right?
Maybe I'll get Ken Seitz on that, or whoever wants to, but I want to make sure that you get in on this panel.
Yeah, okay, thank you. No, it's a great question. Obviously, this all hinges around the farm and the farmer. None of this, solve these problems sitting in rooms like this. So for Nutrien and our role with CANZA, it's really about sharing everything that we're doing on the farm. we talked to, Galen mentioned the 685,000 acres that we've signed up in North America running a carbon pilot for exactly the things Dave was just talking about. So regenerative practices, cover cropping, and zero-till and low-till, and some of our slow-release fertilizers, where we're actually collecting that data, baselining carbon in the soil, and finding that we can generate a high-quality carbon credit. We have over 4,000 agronomists and crop consultants working with we have over 500,000 grower accounts in North America. So it is about being on the farm every day in a trusted relationship with that grower. And as we turn over our agronomists and our crop consultants, actually it's creating a bit of a challenge, because we do have a generation change here in agriculture. So we need to make sure that we maintain that trust with the grower, but that we're on the farm, we're generating those outcomes, we're collecting the data in a way that the farmer trusts, and we're bringing it to a discussion like CANZA. So that's, I take the point entirely, and I think Christian said it earlier. I'm from Saskatchewan as well, I'm down the road from Christian. So I take the point that, you have to have farmers in there, and we have to be on the farm, because when we talk about scope 3, that's where it is, and that's where the work needs to take place.
Yeah, a lot of the questions revolved around trust today, building that trust with farmers. Is there something in any of your companies that you are really proud of in the ways that you have done that in the past?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound pretty basic, but it takes time. As Nutrien, we do what we say we're going to do. We make mistakes, and then we admit to those mistakes, but ultimately over time, working with farmers, it's about improving the financial health of that farmer, improving yields, and now at the same time demonstrating real outcomes in sustainability and avoidance of emissions, or sequestration and ultimate insetting through the value chain. So, it sounds pretty basic, but it's like we try to do what we say we're going to do. We admit to our mistakes, and we do that over a sustained period of time, where, ultimately helping to improve the financial health of the farmer.
I saw a hand up. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you guys could talk a little bit to the role of third-party verification when it comes to carbon credits and how we're actually going to pay for all this. My concern comes, so we raise pigs. Every single pig we raise is third-party audited for animal welfare specs. A multitude of different programs. If a consumer were to go into a grocery store, maybe owned by a person sitting at the front of the room, there's a set of pork products. There isn't one pork product. There's many different labels. My pork might be beside Mr. McCain's pork. Both have third-party processes to verify the claims being made on those labels. They might even be at the same price point, but they're very different programs. They're different in how they're enforced, and it's entirely the reign of private industry, essentially, to oversee the transparency that goes into that third-party verification. As a participant in those, I have high levels of skepticism that we will be able to use that model for climate and for carbon credits. So could you speak to perhaps how we've got some examples where there were consumer concerns around issues. In my case, it's animal welfare, we're trying to meet that. That has led to some very confusing labeling. How do we make sure that in 15 years we don't have a consumer shopping just down the road here, and they're trying to do the right thing with their consumer dollars, and they're trying, but they can't trust it, they don't know. So can you speak to how we can build in transparency into carbon markets so that it's not left to the marketing departments in terms of trying to earn that consumer dollar?
I see people nodding their heads, so feel free to share the mics as well.
Yeah, this is a crucial issue, right? We've all just read the newspapers about various airlines and their carbon offsets being highly criticized. And so I think the point of CANZA is, and this is why our number one project, starting first out of the gate, is working with Christian on MRV in Saskatchewan, right? Because that has to be rigorous, science-based, rock solid. Everyone in the country and internationally has to trust it. And so that is a high bar that we are working on. But the bar is even actually higher than that, because it needs to be low cost. Because if people are willing to pay this much for carbon credits and it costs farmers this much to satisfy the auditors, then it's just not going to work. So that's why, working with the Aero Food Institute and people at the University of Saskatchewan and so on, the whole idea is to leverage technology to get the cost of verification of these MRV systems down, so that the sort of middleman cost between the farmer and the buyer is minimized. And that is a big challenge. We're not done there yet. It's going to be a rocky road, I'm sure, but that is where we want to be ultimately, in a place in 15 years where that person goes into the store and trusts what they see there on a rock solid, scientific based, Canadian standard.
Do you think that CANZA would ever be part of that as a stamp to say that this is something that we approve and we believe, or is that not kind of in that?
I don't think we've thought yet whether CANZA is going to be a stamp. That may not be a brand. It may be something the government will insist as they look to approve the whole MRV methodology. I think the way we're thinking about it is that there's different scales of farms. So Christian runs a very large farm and therefore has the investment capacity to put all technology and the measurement systems in. But as we think about the range of farms in Canada, the range of farmers, we're going to have to build different measurement systems that are accessible by all and democratized. So you may have an input-based model that doesn't have the level of sensors in the soil that Christian has, that will produce a different range of values and a different confidence level. And we will have to, over too much detail, we'll have to adjust the amount of carbon credit based on the science and accuracy of that model. So there likely will be different models and different validation sets that will have to be assigned to that model as we go through and have to scale this across a high percent of the farms. But I see this, something we're gonna have to talk to the government about, is what is the appropriate validation and then monitoring to make sure that there isn't tilling that releases this, destroys the rootstock and releases soil. Can you use LiDAR? There are technologies out there that farms are already using. And we don't have to create it all in Canada. There are a number of nations that are looking at these and using these technologies, and part of what CANZA can do is help scan the world, which is what Dave has been doing. What are others doing, and bring that technology, bring those ideas, bring those systems back to Canada as well. So that's one of the roles that CANZA can play, looking outside in as well.
I think, Stuart, just to acknowledge your question in this sense, I think you asked exactly the right question at exactly the right time, because what you've heard from these people is that the MRV, the topic that you raised, is the number one gating issue that we need to get over, and we need to get it right. Don't have it right yet, but we need to, just as Dave has said and Keith has said and others have said. So great question, the right question, and that is exactly what we're focused on first.
Yes, right here. Oh, sure, yeah, please. All right, lots of questions, this is good.
Thank you. Keith Curry, President of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and I happen to represent the hundreds of thousands of farmers from coast to coast to coast here in Canada. And I have a whole bunch of questions, but I realize we don't have enough time. I think what I want to find out from CANZA is, how are you going to help transfer knowledge to consumers about what the farmers on the ground are doing? Because at the end of the day, and Dave touched on this a little bit just in the last answer, I'm all about practical implementation. You can say and do all you want, but the reality is, if you can't practically implement it on the ground, and the folks in the first panel talked about that, we are so concerned, not only in Canada, but worldwide, about all this stuff going up in the air. And the reality is that doesn't matter unless we care about what's under our feet. And we can talk about carbon sequestration, and Canada, from the agriculture perspective, went from a 1.2 carbon emitter, megaton carbon emitter in 81, to now we're a 4.2 carbon sink. So we've made massive changes, but we're not getting recognized for that. But we don't do things in isolation when it comes to the environment. If we work on soil or carbon sequestration, in order to do that, we have to have healthy soils, which also make sure the water flows in and out during dry years and wet years, that nutrients stay where they're supposed to be, that our soil produces the healthiest plants on the planet. So we can't just do one thing in isolation without affecting other things. We've also been demonized worldwide on the whole climate conversation, that we are bad. But the reality is we're doing a lot of good things, as a lot of people alluded to. So how can CANZA change that narrative to the public? I mean, even things like advertising, some of our sellers of our products are advertising, we're going to do this because it's better, but they're not saying, when we go back to the producers that we're looking at, they're already doing it. I realize it's a marketing niche, and I won't get on that soapbox, but what can CANZA do to portray that image back to the consuming public in particular, and the investment industry, that yes, Canadian agriculture is a place to invest?
Yeah, so I'll jump in first just to say that I think CANZA can serve as a knowledge hub platform for sharing knowledge and being transparent about the information that we're gathering, and increasingly building a network of partners such as the ones you're seeing here, but new partners, some of you that are in the room and others, that are sharing this information in a way that makes sense, both for making navigational choices as organizations so that they can improve their performance, but also so others have a sense of how they're performing. And it's about bringing these MRV systems to a point of visibility so people can see the results. And I should just mention that we've got a new website that's been launched as part of this initiative, www.canza.ca, and there's a knowledge hub there. And that is just started. Today is day one of CANZA really, but you will see that increasingly we'll be able to publish information there. And one of the panels that we had earlier today spoke about data and the importance of having new data systems, integrated data systems, and being able to share that knowledge in a way that's meaningful for consumers, but also for the entire value chain in the agri-food system. And so I think we can play a role in help making sense of complex information and sharing it in a transparent way. And we're committed to doing that.
Yeah, and I might add that this is a group that endeavors to represent the entire value chain and including the farmers. We can convene, through this group. We can get people together. We can share information, and what will be critically important for us to deliver on these ambitious goals will be to standardize. We need to standardize processes. We need to standardize labeling. We need to standardize communication with customers. So once we've established, the standard, then we can tell those stories. At this point, we're still on that journey. We're trying to bring all of these disparate, approaches together into one place so that we can turn them from, call it small, very innovative projects, to large, high impact, initiatives, and that's really the goal. And it's the convening, accountability of this group that we think can bring a lot of weight to bear, to support the journey.
I might just add, it's such an important question, that if we're going to take a 30-year journey to completely transform our economy and make a lot of sacrifice, then we as citizens have the responsibility to become climate literate. Just like we advocate for financial literacy, we have to teach climate literacy at all levels, in primary school, secondary school, because we're going to have to make really tough decisions as a society. And we can't do it in the absence of knowledge and awareness. So climate literacy as a concept is what you're asking for. CANZA, I think, with great answers, what we can do. But at RBC, we're going to advocate for greater climate literacy among our populace and play a role. John Stackos leads our thought leadership. We're publishing so many articles and pieces to help Canada become climate literate, because we can't make these decisions in the absence of knowledge, and we should be debating in our society some of these decisions, because they're going to be trade-offs to taking this journey to net zero.
Question here. What time are we at, guys? I don't have a. Just know that they have to flip this room. Lots of hands up, which is great.
So last one here. Yeah.
Go there, we'll come. Sorry.
Thanks. I come from Saskatchewan farm there, and a question for you from the province that by many accounts and figures is already net zero with our practices, so we're pretty proud of that. You talk about regenerative being the 25 megaton savior of carbon and those sorts of things. What is the definition of regenerative? It's a term that I bristle at in a number of ways because of that. But if that's going to be the answer and the solution, then I'd be interested to hear your thoughts from the panel on what regenerative means to everyone, or if we've got time to do that.
That's good. The climate communication part of this is all part of the conversation.
Yeah. So, just put the boxing gloves on and push me in the ring. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Have a drink then.
Yeah. No, that is a great question, obviously, and I must use those words at my own risk, peril, regenerative agriculture. I don't actually use those words very much because we're talking about a set of practices here on the farm, and I'm sure you can speak about it more than I can. On the farm, they're going to lead to outcomes, and lead to outcomes as it relates to sequestration, as it relates to those insights that we can create through the value chain. I know regenerative agriculture creates this sort of feeling of exactly that regeneration and things that are happening in the soil that actually aren't happening in the soil. For us, it's just some very tried, tested, and true practices which we use in Saskatchewan on the prairie. I'm sure you do on your farm, sort of the zero-till, low-till farming practices that aren't going to release a bunch of carbon. It's soil health related to trash in the soil and organics. It's obviously cover cropping. We have now a set of fertilizers that we can use that avoid nitric oxide release into the atmosphere. We can go on and on like those things. It is those series, and we're learning, I should say as well. We don't know everything. So we're learning, and we're on that farm learning. MRV is a huge component of this. While we're learning, we're trying to set down those standards. I think we all have to recognize that perfect might be the enemy of good here. We are trying to slowly improve climate outcomes, but I hear you, loath to call it regenerative agriculture. It's a series of practices we're learning about, we're getting better, and we are generating real outcomes that we know, and I'm sure you could talk about those on your farm.
I really think it's important to know also, though, that it varies. It's clear already that it varies by region.
Yeah.
It varies by crop. It varies by soil. And what that right balance is, and what the existing baseline of those practices by region, by crop, by soil condition, and so on and so forth, is still part of the progressive learning.
Yeah,
Do you agree with that?
Oh, entirely. And where you're at in this journey as well. I mean, so we can sit here and we can talk about your farm in Saskatchewan. When I go to India, farmers are still applying their potash by hand. It's all direct application, where a lot of the potash is counterfeit. It's got red bricks ground up into it. So, I mean, it very, very specific in terms of crop, soil, climate, all those agronomic, factors that you're putting into your thought process about your farm, but also where you're at in this journey, I think, is an extraordinarily important component.
All right, one more question.
First off, thank you. Super excited about it, especially what CANZA potentially could do for agriculture. Talking to farmers in our area, I think the main fear comes around who sets the rules. So I think step one, measuring MRV or measuring carbon, which I think is huge. I know step two, again, who sets the rules? Are these rules going to change on me as a farmer, because that's a risk I can't mitigate in my business? Are these rules going to handcuff my ability to produce efficiently, or are these rules going to bankrupt me? And I think, again, the biggest thing comes down to who gets to make that decision, and is farmers going to have any input in that decision?
Let's jump in on that one. Charlie, go ahead.
I think the short answer is it's going to take all of us in this room to work together and roll up our sleeves, because we're all on the journey. So it's going to take the part of the private sector, manufacturers, and the farmers working with the government together to set the rules on a go forward. We watch things very closely globally as well to make sure that we're not overstepping or understepping along the way, so that we can continue to share best practices. And I think it's through bodies like this where we can continue to have the right dialogue that we'll get to a much better place, so that we're not handcuffing the farmer and the grower for years to come. Because at the end of the day, this is about mitigating climate change, but also bulletproofing and setting up the viability of the farm for generations to come as well.
And I would say that although our role is to govern this in the long term, it is by having a neutral platform like CANZA, where an organization like ours, which serves as the host organization, doesn't have skin in the game in the same way as some of the others do, other than to evolve the systems change and to evolve the dialogue. So I think that's another critical part of this.
And it's also important to know that the design of the sort of first wave of effort here is pilot driven, where we have active partnerships with farmers, across the country who are helping us determine precisely, what the rules should be, how to measure them, and ultimately to make sure that those risks that you describe are as mitigated as possible before, we advocate for anything, through any, farm across the country. I mean, it's also worth noting, that we're not sitting in a room inventing these practices. Our role is to convene them, and to help mobilize them. Those practices exist, I'm sure, in parts on your farm. I know they exist on yours, and there are plenty of examples of these things. It's about trying to turn what we know works into a scale initiative where there's an incentive for more farmers and more producers to adopt these practices so that we can achieve our goals. It's not about sitting in a room trying to dream up new whiz-bang ideas. We want to take the tried and tested and mobilize them in a way that works as well as possible.
Maybe it was the first question we asked ourselves. Who has to approve this? We all looked at each other and we weren't sure, and that's really what CANZA was designed to do, to go find the answer. It depends if it's inset or offset, and there's, it could bring international bodies into this, depending on how we handle it. So that's part of our mission, is to build a system that is validated by the right people, that is trusted, and is equitable. We don't have the answer yet, to tell you. I think we're just trying to solve it.
At the start, though, the people in the room, there's a good variety of people in this room that obviously care about this very much.
So I like the concept of what's being presented today. I think CANZA has a real opportunity to help the entire agri-food value chain to really dive into how we can continue to grow good food in a climate smart way. And I just hope that the collaboration of the CANZA group can actually bring in the type of investment and knowledge and understanding and communications, more importantly, for the agriculture community to succeed in this.
No, I thought the day was awesome. I'm happy to see the direction that CANZA is going, more or less. Want to make sure that obviously farmers and the agricultural community make sure they get a strong voice in there and have that ability. But so far what I've heard with CANZA is that they are kind of thinking of putting the farmer, more forefront in some of these discussions, which I think is super helpful and also a huge asset to CANZA in general. And I think it's great with the initiatives they're taking, and it's awesome to see actual action and execution going into this versus just talk. So, overall, I thought it was a great day, and looking forward to see what comes out of it.
Well, I think when we focus on progress instead of perfection, we can see today as a real win when you have this many of large private and public companies that are looking to work and collaborate with farmers, and then hopefully we get to collaborate with the federal government on the exact same type of policies and move everything in the right direction.
And as a farmer who's done this kind of stuff before, what do you say to farmers who are skeptical?
Well, any entrepreneur can be a little bit skeptical, right? But I think we got to look back and say, as farmers, we've cared about sustainability or climate positive or regenerative or whatever marketing term you want to use forever. And what I said in there today to the government and to the CEOs was, our personal definition of our legacy or sustainability is to leave the land, the financial statements, the industry, and our community in a better state. And I think all farms can agree with that. And in Western Canada especially, we implemented zero-till in the mid to early 90s without all of this discussion. So we've always cared about making the soil better. Now we just need to make sure we're part of the story so that someone else doesn't tell us how to do it.